Alright, what I'm going to do is start going over some trends using the Wyckoff approach, or at least my understanding of it. Okay, so I'll go over a bunch of trends. Now I'm going to go back into August and then go about the current trends and all that. All right. So what happened here, you had the market and it was pulling back until it reached this point over here. This is an important point, because at this point you had only one bar. So this down wave has only one bar, and it was immediately followed by a 3-bar wave. 1, 2, 3. That 3-bar wave took out the prior high, which I've marked as creek. So it takes it out, and then what happens is it pulls back, also on 1 bar. Now, why is this significant? It's significant because supply is showing an inability to follow through. In other words, supply only has 1 bar. That 1 bar does not represent a lot of selling, because it's only 1 bar. And demand here at this point has 3 bars, which have taken out the prior high. After that, you have another 1 bar pullback. Is this a high supply or low supply? So obviously it's low supply. Why? Because it's 1 bar. So 1 down, 3 up, 1 down, and another 3 up. At this point, you've got to really, you're thinking, because obviously the background shows a downtrend, but at this point, supply has paused and demand has taken control. You have a high and a higher high. Then after that, you have a pullback of 3 bars. Now, according to, just taking a look at the number of bars, you might think this is bearish, because it's 3 bars. It's, but what this right here is not really bearish because of 2 reasons. The first of which is that 3 bars, but they're inside bars that are unable to make progress down. The inability to make progress down on 3 bars is suspicious. If you take a look at the up wave, 3 bars made a lot of progress. If you take a look at the down wave, the 3 bars made little progress. So 3 bars up, more price progress, 3 bars down, less price progress. Given the background, low volume, well, 1 bar is obviously going to have low volume, but 1 bar, and then 3 bars that are unable to make price progress. After that, you have the high taken out. But what's really important is how the high is taken out. The high is taken out with a thrust. This bar here is a thrust. That thrust has an inside bar, which it's good enough for follow through. So 1 bar down, lack of supply. 3 bars up, demand, attempting, not confirming, attempting. 1 bar back down, another lack of supply. 3 bars back up, demand taking out the higher high, shows more resilience. Then 3 bars down, unable to make any progress. 1 bar up, 1 bar pullback, and smash with a thrust that has follow through. This is the point at which sentiment, whether you're a tape reader or chart reader, whatever you want to call it, it's just a matter of semantics. At that point, the market has turned. Why? Demand, supply, demand attempts, supply attempts. Demand proves itself, supply again attempts and fails. demand, lack of supply again, and then demand. I mean, how many times does demand and supply go back and forth, where supply repeatedly shows inability to go down on only one bar, then 3 bars, inability to go down and taken out and thrusting and having a follow through. Demand takeover right at that point. So you have to see these sequences and really gauge for yourself who is in control, and that is the ability of the tape reader. The tape reader, whether he's looking at a chart or a actual time in sales or depth of market, it really doesn't matter. I know people think it matters, but it doesn't, because what the tape reader is doing is reading supply and demand on a medium. That medium could be anything. The tape reader is just reading supply and demand on a particular tape, and a graph is nothing more, a chart is nothing more than a graphical tape. And what you're doing is you're weighing one against the other to see if there's a turning point, or if one has overwhelmed the other. And this is the point where demand overwhelms supply. Anyway, on the pullback is where you enter near the creek area, and it goes higher. At this point, it starts facing resistance, and then again what happens is, what happened? Down on one bar, down on one bar, down on one bar. 3 attempts to break, all fail. Down, 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 all fail. Reversed with a thrust that takes out the high. At this point, you have multiple bars, some follow through after multiple bars, 4 bar down, up, then kind of makes more progress down. It goes higher, but then it just dumps. This right here is extremely important. By the way, what I didn't mention was that this right here, this thrust, is a markup bar. Alright, if you understand accumulation, markup, distribution, and markdown, well, that right there is the delimiter between accumulation and markup, is a markup bar. And markdown, the delimiter between distribution and markdown is the markdown bar. Anyway, so over here what you have is the supply waves are getting strong. Supply wave goes up and then more supply wave. But why is this supply wave so important? This supply wave takes out the low and follows through. That's why it's important. This, you see, the thing you have to consider is whether the demand is going to buy the pullback or whether supply is going to overwhelm demand. In this scenario, it comes back here and demand comes through. In this scenario, that same area where that demand came in, demand did not come in. See that? Instead, supply finally took over and had follow-through supply. Supply attempts, demand attempts, but very weak, and supply takes over. This break and follow through is the takeover, where supply is asserting itself. And then what you have is nothing more than crap in the middle, which eventually retests the high up right here in this sell zone. That's where it's supposed to go with low risk. And then you have this downtrend attempting. But it's important to understand from a Wyckoff tape reading perspective is the ability to judge supply versus demand, and when supply takes over. And it is here, this follow through, this area, that supply takes over. Why? It goes down, and from that same area that demand once was present, it is no longer present, and instead supply breaks it. Now, can demand come in at lower levels and go straight up? Sure it can. We don't know whether that's going to happen. All we know is after this movement here, supply is in control. Just like after this movement over here, demand is in control. After all this back and forth between supply and demand wrestling, at this point, demand is in control. Does that mean that supply can't come at this level and just break everything? Of course it can do that. Just because demand took over, that doesn't mean supply can come right away. But that's why you take the risk and you put it on the trade. Same here, supply took control. Does that mean that if you short, supply comes back here and can't just run you? Of course it can. And it's only your ability to accept that risk which will allow you to find out if that's what happened. At this point, you know one thing and one thing only. Supply is in control. Momentarily, at that point, supply has taken control. Will it maintain control? Or where will demand assert itself and take back control? That is unknown. But you trade what you know. And if you know that supply took control, then you know the areas to sell. You know demand took control, you know the areas to buy. And and that's all you can do as a trader. You can't predict the future. You can only see what has happened and trade it. So at this point, and then this is where a lot of people will get confused, especially by this bar, or this bar. They're going to get really confused by those bars because they're high and close, big range, but they don't really understand that one bar doesn't mean jack. No matter how big it is, one bar is not the same as an entire process. A process that has preliminary supply, a process that has heavy supply and a climax, a process that has follow through, a process that is making a top. One bar means jack, doesn't mean anything relative to an entire process of distribution where strong hands have made a stand. So eventually it goes right back to this area from where the supply came in. See that? That's where initial supply came in. And then it went up and then it dumped. Went to the same area where where the bears are defending. And the dump continues. Goes up, dump. So now what happens? So this is the second trend. Eventually it ends, and then now demand attempts to take over, but you have this range here. How would you know to buy? I don't know to buy it here. I don't, because I don't have a signal here to buy. I have a signal here to sell. But I don't have nothing to buy here, so I don't buy. And anyway, so it goes and makes a top over here. And then eventually it's this bar, which after all of these attempts, boom, the breakdown. Right there, big range, as you can see, massive range, taking out the entire, and then breaks. Now, where do you sell this? You don't look. Here's the thing: when you're seeing this happen, you need to you gotta sell. You according to your system, you sell. I'm supposed to sell up here because of minimum risk, and if I don't get it, guess what? I don't care. That's really important because at this point, it may do this, people are waiting for the retest and it's not giving you, it's just dumping. At this point they're going to sell, and that's not a good thing to do because that means that the person is influenced by FOMO, fear of missing the move. As a trader, your job is not to get every single trade. Your job is to get an opportunity, a gift, which is a low risk retest after the market gives you a signal. And if it doesn't, guess what? There'll be many, many more trades to come. And you get one here, you get one here, and you miss one there. And that's fine. You have to be okay with missing, because really there is no such thing as missing. A trade, by definition, for a trader, is when he gets when his conditions for an edge are met, as well as his risk management parameters. By definition, how a trader defines the trade typically is that he has an edge. The conditions for that edge are met, and the conditions for his risk management parameters are met. If this trade is not within those parameters, then it's not a trade. It's a signal, but not a trade. Okay. All right. Anyway, that's all I have for now. There's other trades setting up, and in the Wyckoff method, the most very important thing is to understand the heart of the Wyckoff method, which is basically supply and demand and how they interact in one another until one dominates the other. And it is that time when one dominates the other, when supply dominates demand or demand dominates supply, where you have a high degree of trend. You have the possibility of trend. Some people call it an imbalance. It's fine, same shit. It's just a trend, and it goes either up or down depending on who's in control. And the ability to catch those trends is is really important. All right. Yeah.